Fala pessoal, meu nome é Michael Maia e seja bem-vindo ao canal de Secando. Hoje é um vídeo mega especial para todos os fãs de Chucky, aqueles fãs que sonham em ter um boneco Good Guy, uma réplica original do filme, no tamanho original, roupas, cabelo, enfim. Hoje eu entrevistei um grande artista que é o Garrett Zima. Ele já é bem conhecido entre os fãs por criar réplicas perfeitas, né, do boneco Good Guy. E gente, quando eu falo perfeitas, é perfeita mesmo. O que se torna um sonho de consumo, né? Para quem não conhece, Garrett, ele é americano, ele mora nos Estados Unidos, especificamente na cidade de Manitowoc. Ele é um especialista nessa indústria do terror, onde ele cria adereços animatrônicos personalizados. Quem tem Instagram pode acessar @Garrett Zima. Lá ele posta muita coisa, muito conteúdo da sua rotina, criando os bonecos, o processo, enfim. É muito bacana mesmo e vale a pena seguir e conferir tudo que ele posta. Conversamos, onde eu fiz algumas perguntas e ele gentilmente me respondeu por vídeo. Então eu vou deixar aqui a pergunta e logo em seguida a resposta dele. E antes de ver essa entrevista, já deixa seu like aqui nesse vídeo que deu trabalho e ajuda muito a fortalecer o canal, beleza? Então confere aí.
How I got started was I was at an art gallery and I met a gentleman named Steve. He had worked on Child's Play 2 under a company called Image Engineering, and I was able to acquire some movie props from him to use as references for making the Good Guy doll. And it took a lot of work getting the doll just right, because the props that I was provided from him were very distorted. I was able to recreate a Good Guy doll, and the first one was made. It weighed about the weight of a bowling ball. It was very heavy, the first one, and it had a resin torso body with wired jointed arms. Now I use like a ball joint arm, but yeah, at the time that's how I made it, and they've gotten better and better over the years. To answer your question on how I made my dolls originally, I used resin, which is kind of a solid, thick, well, there's a little bit of hollowness to it, but it's pretty heavy. But I made the torsos out of resin, and then I used ball joints on the legs and the arms, and that was how I did it in the beginning. But I eventually upgraded to making them out of flexible polyfoam. So it gives you the most accurate shape possible, because it's from the original, recasted from the original prop. And so yeah, it was done that way. So the hands, I've always done them out of resin. The shoes, I always did them out of resin. The problem with doing things in rubber, although it looks more accurate, is rubber just sort of degrades. So I always made my shoes and hands out of resin, and the head is also made out of resin. And that way, when they're it's a painted resin. So over the years, it's always going to retain its original color because it's painted on, and it should not degrade. The resin that I use is pretty resistant. So, and it's hollow. I have it all made on a rotocasting machine, and that makes the parts perfectly hollow, but a good thickness around them to hold itself up. The steps to making a doll are sort of complicated. It's just something I just make naturally now, because I've made a certain amount of Good Guy dolls for people. But it's there's so many ways to make it. I've seen people make stuffing bodies of the doll. I use polyfoam because to me it gives me the most accurate shape. And a lot of these dolls are just meant for display purposes. So when it's displayed, the proportions look correct. And so that's why I use polyfoam. But it just requires a lot of molds. It's unfortunately very expensive to make molds. To answer your next question, how I got to make the perfect mold, I couldn't even tell you how many molds I've made since I started making Good Guy dolls, because every time or every year I always look back at the previous mold I made and I want to improve it. and make it cleaner so that there's less prep time. I mean, the molds I currently have are the best that I've ever made. And I'm hoping to get even better. So I'm sure that the molds I'll make in a couple years will even look better. But right now they're very, very clean. One thing about making a mold is you want to make it economical. You don't want to waste a bunch of silicone or resin. You want to be able to make it so that it's going to pull out a good casting every time without any just sort of distortion. And so that's basically what I got going on these molds. Typically about a week, and that's if everything goes right. Sometimes things don't go right. Certain dolls that I make have animatronics to them that can take a little bit longer because I'm very tedious about making sure the mechanism not only looks good in the head, but is going to function properly. And because of the servos, I don't want them having any sort of stress. You don't want to risk a servo burning out. So you want to make sure everything is moving properly inside the head. So yeah, it all depends on how I'm making it. Sometimes I make multiple dolls at one time. And then it usually takes me a little bit longer, like 2 weeks. But for certain consistency, sometimes I will work on 4 or 5 heads at one time and just paint them all at the same time to save me all the time of cleaning my airbrushes or cleaning my paint brushes. I'll work on multiple heads at one time. I've had a relationship with Trick or Treat Studios for close to 3 years, maybe longer at this point. But I ran into the owners of Trick or Treat Studios at a trade show, and they approached me about making a good guy doll for them. At that point, I believe I had done some things with Tony Gardner for Cult of Chucky. I could be wrong, it could have been after that. And so then they were very interested in me because I had, so much work I've done on these good guy dolls. And so they wanted me to get involved with their merchandise. And I was happy to do that. So we created the good guy doll. That was kind of the first main product. And then the tool helmet, the tool bib, the hammer, and hopefully some things in the future. So I can't tell you exactly what I'm working on with them right now, but cross my fingers that some things will be shown soon of new products. There is a lot of demand for the good guy doll. I've been making the same good guy face, possibly with some adjustments over the years to it for about, I think, 4 or 5 years. And people still enjoy it and order it. With Trick or Treat Studios, there's still a great demand for the good guy doll. I think recently they just sold out of all their stock, and they're working with the factory to make more good guy dolls for the demand of it. My personally handmade dolls that I make, I get a good demand, keeps the shop running and keeps everything going, which is nice. And I sell all over the world, mainly to Japan. I get a lot of Japan customers that order good guy dolls, and a lot in the United States too, but a lot in Japan. I think the most is Japan. But yeah, there's a great demand.
Agradecimento muito especial pro Garrett, que cedeu essa entrevista para mim. O cara realmente é um artista. Se inscreve aqui no canal se você não é inscrito ainda, que tem muito conteúdo de terror e de Chucky. Compartilha com a galera aí, com seus amigos que curtem Chucky. Bora todo mundo lá seguir o Garrett. Muito obrigado quem tá assistindo aí, um grande abraço e até a próxima.